Human POWs executed. The consequences were catastrophic. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened at 400 Standard Time. Ambassador of the Empire stood before the assembled representatives, her four arms gesturing frantically as she tried to explain what had happened on 438B. "Honored members," she began, her translator struggling with her rapid speech, "we must address this situation immediately. What my government did was, it was within our legal rights according to the Geneva Conventions of War that humans themselves established." Council Speaker, a towering with crystalline skin, leaned forward in his chair. His species had been mediating galactic conflicts for over 1,000 years, and he had never seen such panic in an ambassador's eyes. "Ambassador, please slow down and explain exactly what transpired on the mining colony." His breathing apparatus wheezed as she tried to compose herself. 3 standard days ago, forces captured a human supply convoy attempting to break through our blockade of 438B. The convoy consisted of 12 vessels carrying medical supplies, food, and ammunition to the besieged human colony. The human representative, Admiral Sarah, sat perfectly still in her chair. Her face showed no emotion, but every other ambassador in the room could feel the tension radiating from her direction. The humans had only been part of the Galactic Council for 50 years, making them the youngest species to achieve interstellar recognition. "The convoy crews totaled 47 humans," continued. "They refused to surrender their cargo and attempted to ram our flagship. During the brief battle, they disabled 2 of our destroyers before being overwhelmed." "Get to the point," Admiral said quietly. Her voice was so soft that several ambassadors had to strain to hear her, but something in her tone made the massive chamber fall completely silent. His mandibles clicked nervously. The captured humans were classified as prisoners of war. However, they repeatedly attempted to escape, killed 3 guards, and sabotaged our detention facility's life support systems. Under Article 85 of the Human Established Geneva Conventions, we executed them for war crimes against personnel. The silence that followed was deafening. Ambassador's crystalline body began to dim, a sign of deep concern among his species. The Empire had technically followed the rules of war, but something felt terribly wrong about the situation. Admiral stood up slowly. She was smaller than most beings in the chamber, but her presence somehow filled the enormous space. "Ambassador, I need you to confirm something for me. You said all 47 humans were executed." "Yes, that is correct. The executions were carried out yesterday at 1200 hours Standard Time." "Nodded once. And you informed the human government of these executions when?" "The notification was sent through proper diplomatic channels immediately after the sentences were carried out, as required by galactic law." "I see." His voice remained perfectly calm. "Council Speaker, I request permission to make a statement to the Assembly." His body flickered with uncertainty. "Of course, Admiral, the floor is yours." Walked to the center of the chamber, her boots echoing in the silence. She looked up at the hundreds of representatives from dozens of species, all watching her with intense curiosity. "Members of the Galactic Council," she began, "I want to first acknowledge that the Empire acted within the technical bounds of interstellar law. The Geneva Conventions do indeed provide for the execution of prisoners of war under specific circumstances." Several ambassadors shifted uncomfortably. Where was this going? "However," continued, "I believe there are some things about human culture and psychology that the Empire, and perhaps other members of this council, do not fully understand." His 4 eyes focused on the human admiral with growing unease. "You see," said, beginning to pace slowly, "humans have a very particular relationship with death and sacrifice. When we established the Geneva Conventions, we were trying to create rules that would make war less horrific, but we never eliminated our fundamental nature." She stopped and looked directly at. "The 47 humans you executed were not just soldiers, Ambassador. They were volunteers who knew they were on a suicide mission. The colony on 438B contains 12,000 human civilians, including 4,000 children. Those 47 people died trying to get food and medicine to those children." Admiral interrupted gently. "While we understand this is tragic, the Empire followed proper procedures." "Oh, I'm not finished," said, her voice still eerily calm. "You see, there's something else about humans that I don't think the rest of the galaxy understands. We remember. We remember every slight, every injustice, every death of our people, and we have this peculiar habit of making those who wrong us pay for it. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. "Admiral," said, her voice trembling slightly, "surely you're not threatening military action over a legitimate application of the laws of war." Smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. It was not a pleasant expression. "Threaten? Oh no, Ambassador, I'm not threatening anything. I'm simply explaining what's going to happen." She activated her personal communicator. "This is Admiral to Earth Command. Authorization Omega 77. Execute Order 1947. Across the chamber, communication devices began lighting up as representatives received urgent messages from their home governments. Within minutes, the chamber was buzzing with confused chatter in a dozen languages. "Admiral," said urgently, "what is Order 1947? Smile grew wider. "Order 1947, Council Speaker, is named for the year humans first developed nuclear weapons. It's our total war authorization. As of this moment, humanity has declared unlimited warfare against the Empire." His breathing apparatus was now working overtime. But that's insane. We followed the law. You can't declare war over illegal action." "Can't we?" asked. "You're absolutely right that you followed the letter of the law, but you see, Ambassador, there's something you don't understand about human laws. We wrote the Geneva Conventions to try to contain our own savagery. We created rules because without them, we do terrible things." She began walking toward, and the ambassador instinctively backed away. "You took our people prisoner, and that was acceptable. You could have held them for the duration of the conflict, and we would have done the same for any prisoners we captured. But you chose to kill them. You chose to execute 47 humans who were trying to feed children." The chamber was now completely silent, except for the sound of boots on the floor. "The problem, Ambassador, is that by executing our prisoners, you've told us that you don't want to play by civilized rules anymore. So we won't either." Stopped directly in front of. Despite being a full meter shorter than the alien ambassador, she somehow seemed to tower over her. "You wanted to know what makes humans different from other species in this galaxy. We're the only species that ever looked at the concept of total war and decided to make it an art form. We're the only species that ever built weapons capable of sterilizing entire worlds and then had the wisdom to be terrified of ourselves." She turned to address the entire chamber again. "Every species in this galaxy achieved interstellar travel because they learned to cooperate, to avoid conflict, to find peaceful solutions. Humans achieved interstellar travel because we learned to kill each other so efficiently that we finally scared ourselves into working together." Ambassador's crystalline body was now barely glowing. "Admiral, surely there must be some way to resolve this diplomatically. The loss of life should have been considered by the Empire before they decided to execute our prisoners," interrupted. "But don't worry, Council Speaker, this will be resolved quickly." She activated her communicator again. "Admiral to Battle Group Prometheus, you are cleared to jump to space. Rules of engagement are unrestricted. Show them what happens when you kill humans." Stumbled backward. You can't. Your fleet is in the outer rim. It would take weeks to reach space." His expression didn't change. "What fleet are you referring to, Ambassador?" Before could answer, another human officer entered the chamber and handed a data pad. She glanced at it and nodded. "Ah, perfect timing. Ambassador, I'm pleased to inform you that as of 30 seconds ago, the human battleship Vengeance and her escort fleet dropped out of hyperspace directly above the..." The ambassador's forearms began trembling uncontrollably. "Impossible. Our sensors would have detected any human fleet movements." "Would they?" asked. "Tell me, Ambassador, what do you know about human stealth technology?" She turned back to the chamber. "You see, honored members, while the rest of the galaxy was developing faster engines and better communication systems, humans were working on ways to hide. We got very good at it during our wars with each other." Another message appeared on his communicator. She read it and chuckled. "Oh, this is interesting. It appears that a second human fleet has just appeared over Prime's largest military installation, and a third fleet is now in position around your primary shipyards." Collapsed into her chair. "But how many ships do you have?" "More than you might expect," said simply. You see, when humanity joined the Galactic Council 50 years ago, we agreed to limit our military to defensive purposes only. What we didn't mention was that we have a very broad definition of defensive. She began walking back toward her seat, but stopped halfway. Oh, an ambassador. You might want to contact your government immediately. My fleet commanders have orders to begin orbital bombardment in exactly 1 hour unless all forces withdraw from 438B and the blockade is lifted. You're bluffing, whispered. You wouldn't dare attack civilian targets. Turned around slowly. Civilian targets? Who said anything about civilian targets, though I suppose that depends on your definition. Are military shipyards civilian? How about government buildings, naval academies, weapons manufacturing facilities? She paused, letting the implications sink in. You executed 47 humans who were trying to deliver food to children. Those humans volunteered for a mission they knew would probably get them killed, and they did it because they believed in protecting innocent life. When you killed them, you sent a message about how much you value human life. His voice grew colder. Now we're sending you a message about how much we value life. I think you'll find our message much more emphatic. The chamber erupted in chaos as representatives began frantically trying to contact their governments. Several species that had defense pacts with the Empire were demanding immediate explanations from their military commands. Ambassador stood up, his crystalline body now completely dark. Admiral, I must formally protest this action. The Galactic Council cannot condone. The Galactic Council, interrupted, has exactly zero jurisdiction over humanity's response to the execution of our prisoners of war. We're not asking for your approval, Council Speaker. We're informing you of what's happening. She activated her communicator one more time. Admiral to Earth Command, status report. A voice crackled through the speaker, loud enough for the entire chamber to hear. Admiral, all fleets are in position. Government has been contacted directly through their military channels. They have 57 minutes to comply with our demands. Understood. What about the colony? The blockade is holding, but our analysts believe the colonists have enough supplies for maybe another week. Nodded grimly. Then we don't have time for extended negotiations. She looked directly at Ambassador, I suggest you contact your government immediately, because in 56 minutes, if those ships are still blockading our people, we're going to start shooting. Was now completely panicked. This is madness. You're talking about starting a war that could spread across the entire galaxy. No, said quietly. I'm talking about ending one. You started this war when you decided to execute our prisoners. We're simply going to finish it. She sat down in her chair and folded her hands calmly in her lap. The choice is yours, Ambassador. Lift the blockade and allow humanitarian aid to reach the colony, or discover exactly why humanity was so feared before we joined this council. The chamber fell silent except for the frantic clicking of mandibles as she tried to establish communication with her. Every other ambassador watched in fascination and horror as they witnessed something they had never seen before. Humanity dropping the mask of civilization they had worn for 50 years. And in that moment, many of them began to understand why humans had been the last species invited to join the Galactic Council, despite having achieved interstellar travel decades before their admission. They were finally seeing what the galaxy's older, wiser species had spent half a century trying to forget. Humans were not like other species. When pushed to their limits, they didn't seek compromise or retreat. They did exactly what their evolutionary history had trained them to do for millions of years. They went to war. Human POWs executed. The consequences were catastrophic. High Admiral of the Imperial Navy stared at the tactical display in disbelief. 37 human vessels had appeared in orbit around Prime without triggering a single sensor alert. His supposedly impenetrable defense network had been completely bypassed. Sir, his communications officer called out, her voice trembling, we're receiving a transmission from the lead human vessel. They're identifying themselves as Battle Group Prometheus under the command of Admiral. His mandibles clicked with frustration. In his 40 years of military service, he had never encountered a situation like this. Put them through. The main display shifted to show a human male in a dark uniform. Unlike the diplomatic facade humans typically wore, this one's expression was cold and professional. There was no attempt at courtesy or negotiation in his eyes. Hi, Admiral, the human said without preamble. I am Admiral. You have 43 minutes to withdraw all forces from the 438B system and lift your blockade of the human colony. Admiral replied, trying to maintain his composure. Your sudden appearance in space constitutes an act of war, under galactic law. Galactic law became irrelevant the moment your government executed 47 human prisoners, interrupted. This is not a negotiation, High Admiral. This is an ultimatum. His four arms spread in a gesture of confusion. Admiral, surely we can reach some diplomatic solution. The prisoners were executed under the Geneva Conventions that your own species established. We followed proper procedures. You followed the letter of the law while completely ignoring its spirit, said. Those conventions were written to minimize suffering in war, not to provide legal cover for executing prisoners whose only crime was trying to deliver food to children. The Admiral pulled up his own tactical display. The human fleet was positioned perfectly to strike every critical military installation on the planet simultaneously. Worse, his sensors were showing energy signatures that didn't match any known human technology. What kind of weapons are you carrying? Asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. His expression didn't change. The kind we've been developing since we joined the Galactic Council. While other species focused on exploration and trade, humans never stopped preparing for war. It's what we do. But the peace treaties restrict offensive military action, yes. They say nothing about developing defensive capabilities, and everything we've built over the past 50 years has been classified as defensive. Studied the human's face, looking for any sign of bluff or uncertainty. He found none. You're talking about weapons that have never been tested in actual combat, he said. For all you know, our shields could withstand whatever you throw at us. For the first time, smiled. It was not reassuring. High Admiral, let me tell you something about human military doctrine. We don't build weapons and hope they work. We build weapons we know will work because we test them extensively before deployment. He gestured off-screen. 3 days ago, we conducted a field test of our new orbital kinetic bombardment system on a dead moon in the Vega system. Would you like to see the results? Before could respond, a secondary display activated showing surveillance footage of a barren moon. A single projectile streak appeared from orbit, followed by an explosion that cracked the moon's surface from pole to pole. That was a single projectile traveling at 90% the speed of light, explained casually. Each of my ships carries 50 such projectiles. My fleet consists of 37 ships. His breathing apparatus began working overtime as he calculated the implications. That's enough firepower to destroy an entire planet. Actually, it's enough firepower to destroy several planets, corrected. But we're not interested in destroying worlds, High Admiral. We're interested in making a point. Which is, when you execute human prisoners, there are consequences. Across the galaxy, similar conversations were taking place as human fleets revealed themselves around every major military installation. The aliens had assumed humanity's small size and recent arrival in the galactic community meant they were weak. They were learning otherwise. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Admiral received a communication from his counterpart at the shipyards. Admiral, came the voice of Captain Sarah, they are moving to intercept us with their home fleet, 12 heavy cruisers and 46 destroyers. Nodded, defensive positions, Captain. Show them what human point defense systems can do. The fleet approached in standard battle formation, confident in their numerical superiority. Their weapons had been tested against every known form of defensive technology in the galaxy. They were certain that even advanced human systems couldn't protect against such overwhelming firepower. They were wrong. The first volley consisted of over 300 plasma bolts and guided missiles, enough to destroy a small fleet. The human ships didn't even attempt to dodge. Instead, their defensive systems activated, creating a web of energy that intercepted every single incoming projectile. Impossible, High Admiral whispered as he watched the tactical display. No defensive system is that efficient. Would you like to see our offensive capabilities now? Admiral asked. Before could respond, the human ships opened fire. But instead of the expected energy weapons or missiles, they launched what appeared to be small metal rods. What are those? Demanded. Tungsten carbide penetrator rounds accelerated to relativistic speeds, explained. Very simple technology, really. We just throw heavy things very, very fast. The results were devastating. Each round punched through shields as if they didn't exist, then through armor plating, then through the ships themselves. In 30 seconds, the entire home fleet was either destroyed or crippled. How? Asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Physics, replied. When you accelerate mass to near light speed, it becomes unstoppable. Your shields are designed to deflect energy weapons and slow down conventional projectiles. They can't stop something moving at 90% of light speed because the physics don't work that way. Checked his chronometer. You now have 31 minutes to withdraw from 438B. Meanwhile, in the Galactic Council chambers, Ambassador had finally managed to establish communication with her government. The conversation was not going well. What do you mean, we can't fight them? She screeched into her communicator. We have the largest military in this sector of the galaxy. The voice of Supreme Commander came through with obvious strain. Ambassador, they destroyed our entire home fleet in 30 seconds. Their weapons technology is decades ahead of anything we've ever encountered. But our intelligence reports said humans were barely capable of interstellar travel when they joined the Council. Our intelligence reports were wrong, admitted. They've been hiding their true capabilities for 50 years. Admiral, who had been listening to the conversation with undisguised satisfaction, stood up and addressed the chamber again. This is what I was trying to explain earlier, she said to the assembled representatives. Humans don't just plan for war. We plan for every possible war against every possible enemy using every possible method. She activated her personal display, showing a star map of human space. When we joined the Galactic Council, we had to submit detailed information about our military capabilities. What we didn't mention was that those reports only covered our public military. Our actual defensive force is approximately 50 times larger than what we officially acknowledged. Gasps echoed around the chamber as the implications became clear. For 50 years, continued, every human diplomatic mission, every trade delegation, every cultural exchange has been gathering intelligence on every species in the galaxy. We've studied your tactics, your technology, your psychology, and your weaknesses. Ambassador's crystalline body was flickering rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation among his species. Admiral, you're describing a level of deception that violates every principle of the Galactic Council. No, replied calmly. We're describing a level of preparation that has kept the peace for 50 years. Do you think it's a coincidence that there hasn't been a major interstellar war since humanity joined the Council? The chamber fell silent as representatives considered this. You see, explained, other species achieve peace through cooperation and mutual benefit. Humans achieve peace through superior firepower and the promise of mutually assured destruction. Both methods work, but ours is more permanent. Her communicator buzzed with another update from the fleet. Admiral, came Admiral's voice, forces are still maintaining their blockade. They're attempting to use the human colony as a shield, threatening to bombard the surface if we approach. His expression hardened. Admiral, you are authorized to demonstrate our precision targeting capabilities. Select a military target far enough from the colony to ensure no civilian casualties, but close enough to make our point clear. Understood, Admiral. Within minutes, reports began flooding in from across space. Human kinetic strikes had simultaneously destroyed military communications arrays on 17 different worlds. The strikes were so precise that in several cases, they destroyed single buildings while leaving adjacent structures completely untouched. The message should be clear, announced to the chamber. We can hit any target we choose, anywhere we choose, with perfect accuracy. The colony on 438B is not protecting the blockade. The blockade is simply making us choose our targets more carefully. Ambassador was now openly weeping, her breathing apparatus struggling to keep up with her panic. You're insane, all of you. This will destroy everything the Galactic Council has built. On the contrary, replied, this will ensure it survives, because now everyone knows what happens when you push humanity too far. She looked around the chamber, making eye contact with representatives from dozens of species. For 50 years, you've all assumed that humans were just another peaceful species that had war. You were wrong. We didn't outgrow war. We became so good at it that we scared ourselves into finding alternatives, but when those alternatives fail. Her communicator buzzed again. Admiral, this is Captain at the shipyards. We've just received word that enemy forces are preparing to execute the human civilians on 438B rather than allow them to be rescued. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several more degrees. Captain said, her voice becoming deadly quiet, please repeat that. Ma'am, command is threatening to bombard the colony rather than lift the blockade. They're saying that if they can't have the system, no one can. For the first time since the crisis began, his composure cracked slightly. When she spoke again, her voice carried a tone that made several ambassadors instinctively move away from her. Patch me through to Admiral immediately. Admiral here, ma'am. Admiral, they have just threatened to murder 12,000 human civilians rather than lift their blockade. I want you to send a very clear message about how we respond to such threats. What are your orders, Admiral? Looked directly at Ambassador, who was now trembling uncontrollably. Admiral, you are authorized to demonstrate why humanity was feared before we joined this council. Show them what we were like before we learned restraint. The silence that followed was deafening. Every representative in the chamber understood that they were witnessing a moment that would define interstellar relations for centuries to come. They were about to see what humans were truly capable of when someone threatened their children. Human POWs executed. The consequences were catastrophic. Admiral stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, watching the tactical display show thousands of civilians going about their daily lives on the planet below. They had no idea that their government had just signed their death warrant by threatening to murder human children. Sir, his tactical officer called out, we're receiving panic transmissions from the fleet around 438B. They're demanding to know our intentions. His jaw tightened. In his 30 years of military service, he had never given an order like the one he was about to give. But threatening children changed everything. Open a channel to all forces, all frequencies. Channel open, sir. Stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of humanity's accumulated rage. This is Admiral of the Human Defense Force. Your government has just made a fatal error in judgment. You have threatened to murder 12,000 human civilians, including 4,000 children, rather than lift an illegal blockade. He paused, letting his words sink in across every communication network. I want you to understand something about human psychology. We are a species that has fought wars for resources, for territory, for ideology, for religion. But there is one thing that transcends all of these motivations, one line that should never be crossed. The bridge was completely silent, except for the hum of machinery. You have threatened our children, and that changes everything. Activated his fleet-wide communication system. All ships, this is Admiral, execute Protocol 7. I repeat, execute Protocol 7. Across human space, the order was received simultaneously. Protocol 7 was something that had been planned for decades but never implemented. It was humanity's final answer to any species that threatened extinction-level warfare against human civilians. On Earth, massive doors opened in the sides of mountains that most of the galaxy didn't know existed. From these hidden facilities, ships began to emerge. Not the sleek vessels that the galaxy had grown accustomed to seeing, but massive, angular warships built for one purpose only: total destruction. In the asteroid fields around Jupiter, camouflaged mining stations suddenly revealed themselves as military shipyards, launching hundreds of vessels that had been constructed in complete secrecy over 5 decades. Hidden bases throughout human space activated simultaneously, releasing a fleet that dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever seen. Back on Prime, High Admiral watched his sensors in growing horror as energy signatures began appearing throughout his space. First dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of human ships dropping out of hyperspace around every inhabited system. How many ships do they have? His sensor operator whispered. Sir, his communications officer called out, we're receiving a transmission from Earth. It's being broadcast on all frequencies across the galaxy. Put it through. The image that appeared on the main screen was not Admiral or any other diplomat. It was a man in a simple black uniform with no rank insignia, standing in what appeared to be a command center carved into solid rock. I am General Harrison, Supreme Commander of the Human Defense Force. For 50 years, humanity has maintained the fiction that we were a peaceful species that had our warlike nature. This was a lie told for the protection of the galaxy. His voice was calm, but there was something in his eyes that made every listener understand they were looking at someone who had spent decades preparing for this moment. The truth is that humans never stopped being what we were. We simply became more efficient at it. While other species developed faster ships and better communication systems, we focused on one thing: building the most effective military force the galaxy has ever seen. The display behind him showed a real-time tactical map of the galaxy. Red dots representing human forces were appearing around every major star system. 47 humans died trying to deliver food and medicine to children. The Empire executed these people under the legal cover of the Geneva Conventions. They then compounded this error by threatening to murder 12,000 human civilians rather than face the consequences of their actions. General stepped closer to the camera. This ends now. Across space, human fleets began moving toward their targets, but these weren't the precision strikes they had demonstrated earlier. These were invasion forces. On 438b, the human colonists huddled in their shelters as ships took up bombardment positions above their settlement. Colony Administrator Dr. Elizabeth Harper tried to maintain order among the terrified civilians. "Everyone stay calm," she announced over the colony's communication system. "Help is coming." "How do you know?" asked Dr. James, the colony's chief medical officer. "They have us completely surrounded." Harper pointed to her personal communicator, which was displaying a message she had received 5 minutes earlier. "Because I just got a transmission from the Human Defense Force. All colonists are to take shelter in the underground facilities immediately. Something big is about to happen." Outside, the blockade fleet was positioning itself for a final assault on the colony. Admiral of the 23rd Battle Group had received his orders directly from the Supreme Command: destroy the human settlement and blame it on a terrorist attack by extremist elements. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "all ships are in position for orbital bombardment." "Excellent, begin the attack in." His order was interrupted by his sensor operator's panicked voice. "Admiral, multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace. They're everywhere." The tactical display exploded with contacts as a massive human fleet materialized around 438b. But these weren't the sleek vessels that had appeared over Prime. These were warships the size of small cities, bristling with weapons that no one in the galaxy had ever seen before. "This is Admiral Rachel Stone of the Human Defense Force," came a voice over all frequencies. "Forces, you have 30 seconds to withdraw from this system or be destroyed." Admiral stared at the massive human ships in disbelief. Where did they come from? How did they get past our sensors? "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving another transmission. It's from Supreme Command." "Put it through." The voice of Supreme Commander On came through, shaking with fear. "All forces, this is Supreme Command. Withdraw immediately. Do not engage human forces. I repeat, do not engage." "But sir, our orders were to—" "Our orders have changed," On screamed. "They have over 10,000 ships. They're surrounding every world. Withdraw now." As Admiral struggled to process this information, the human fleet commander's voice returned. "Admiral, your 30 seconds are up." What happened next would be studied by military analysts for centuries to come. The human ships didn't fire energy weapons or missiles. Instead, they deployed what appeared to be a new form of technology entirely. Massive energy fields projected from the human vessels, surrounding each ship in a bubble of crackling force. Within seconds, every vessel in the system found itself completely powerless. Their engines shut down, their weapons went offline, and their life support systems switched to emergency power. "This is Admiral Stone," came the calm voice. "Crews, you are now prisoners of war. Prepare to be boarded." Admiral's ship was among the first to be boarded by human marines. He expected armed soldiers ready for battle. What he found instead was something much more terrifying: professional, efficient warriors who had clearly done this many times before. The lead human marine, a woman with the bearing of someone who had seen decades of combat, approached directly. "Admiral," she said in perfectly accented, I am Colonel Martinez of the 7th Marine Expeditionary Force. You and your crew are now prisoners of war under the protection of the Geneva Conventions. You will be treated according to the same standards your government chose to ignore when they executed our people. Mandibles clicked with confusion. You're going to follow the conventions, even after what we did. Colonel Martinez's expression hardened slightly. Admiral, the difference between humans is that we actually understand what those conventions mean. They exist to prevent war from becoming genocide. Your government forgot that. She gestured to her Marines, who were already beginning to secure the ship. You will be held safely until this conflict is resolved. You will be fed, given medical care, and allowed to communicate with your families, because that's what civilized beings do. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the true scope of humanity's military capabilities was becoming clear. The secret fleet that had emerged from hidden bases numbered in the tens of thousands of ships. More importantly, their technology was decades ahead of anything the galaxy had ever seen. In the Galactic Council chambers, Ambassador was receiving real-time updates from the fleet commanders. Admiral, came General's voice, all major military installations have been neutralized. Their home fleet has been captured intact, and their government is requesting immediate negotiations for surrender. The chamber erupted in chaos as representatives realized what they had just witnessed. Humanity had essentially conquered the second-largest military power in the galaxy in less than 6 hours. How is this possible? Ambassador asked, his crystalline body now completely dark with shock. Stood up and faced the assembly. For 50 years, she said, every human civilian who joined a galactic expedition, every human engineer who worked on joint projects, every human diplomat who attended cultural exchanges was also an intelligence operative. She activated her personal display, showing a comprehensive map of galactic military installations. We mapped every military base, analyzed every weapons system, studied every tactical doctrine. We knew exactly where to strike and exactly how to neutralize every threat simultaneously. Ambassador had stopped trembling and was now sitting in stunned silence. But more importantly, continued, we spent 5 decades building a military force specifically designed to fight the kind of war we hoped would never be necessary. While you all focused on trade and diplomacy, we were preparing for the day someone would try to genocide our people. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every representative. That day has come and gone. In 6 hours, humanity went from being seen as the junior partner in galactic civilization to being the dominant military power in known space. And we did it without killing a single civilian or violating a single law of war. Admiral's voice came through her communicator again. Admiral, the government is requesting permission to surrender unconditionally. They're offering reparations and complete withdrawal from all disputed territories. Nodded terms, Admiral. They want to negotiate. Tell them there are no negotiations, said firmly. Here are the terms. Complete withdrawal from 438B, immediate release of all human prisoners, reparations equivalent to 50 years of colonial development costs, and formal acknowledgement that the execution of our prisoners was a war crime. And if they refuse? His expression didn't change. Then they can explain to their people why there no longer has a functioning government. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Every representative understood that they had just witnessed the birth of a new galactic order. Humanity was no longer the young species seeking acceptance. They were now the species that others would seek acceptance from. And they had achieved this transformation not through conquest or aggression, but by responding to an unprovoked attack with overwhelming, decisive force. The age of human diplomacy was over. The age of human dominance had begun.